Hey guys, it's Mike here, and over the course of my time on YouTube, I've been asked a lot of questions about Dragon Ball. These are questions ranging from character interactions to in-universe dynamics. Although I've dedicated videos to many of these questions, there is still plenty left to be explored. So in this video, I'm going to be listing off and discussing 10 of the most frequently asked questions about Dragon Ball that I have yet to do a video on. Make sure to subscribe to this channel and enable notifications so you could see all of my content right away when it comes out. So first up on this list would be one that I constantly get asked even till this day, which is, what if Captain Ginyu swapped bodies with a fusion? So the general idea behind this question is, due to the temporary nature of fusion, if someone were to say body swap with a fusion, and then they were to split back into their two components, what exactly would happen to not only the individuals who were swapped bodies with, but Captain Ginyu himself? And this is a difficult question to answer because of the fact that fusion was introduced after Captain Ginyu had his time in the series. Back when everyone was fighting against the Ginyu Force on Namek, fusion wasn't even a concept in Toriyama's mind, at least aside from the Namekian version. So we never really had a situation where this could have happened, except for perhaps one point during Resurrection F, and more specifically during the Dragon Ball Super version of Resurrection F, which is during the fight between the Z Fighters and Tagoma, when Gotenks showed up and attacked him. Now, Captain Ginyu showed up as the Frog and wrote down change and took over Tagoma's body. Now, Gotenks defused pretty much right after he attacked Tagoma, which is also pretty weird considering he wasn't even a Super Saiyan 3 at the time, and I doubt it took him a half an hour just to get there. But let's say that theoretically Captain Ginyu swapped bodies with Gotenks instead of Tagoma, or once he was in Tagoma's body, he swapped bodies with Gotenks then. What exactly would happen? Well, I assume that Goten Trunks would coexist within Ginyu's body, perhaps as the melded personality that was Gotenks. However, when it comes to Ginyu himself, once Gotenks defuses, which would happen pretty quickly, would his personality split in two between Goten Trunks? Would it only inhabit one of their bodies? Or would Captain Ginyu cease to exist? It's certainly an interesting question, but not something that we'll likely ever see happen, especially since Ginyu is now officially dead at the hands of Vegeta. But you never know, maybe Tagoma learned that ability too. And the next question is, why didn't Beerus recognize MAJIN BUU when he met him during Battle of Gods? Now this also ties into the general idea of why Beerus doesn't seem to be aware of what happened with the Supreme Kais and MAJIN BUU in general, because he never once references it, and realistically if Beerus knew about Buu and him attacking the Supreme Kais, and heard the description of Buu from the only surviving Supreme Kai, Shin, who clearly has a relationship of some kind with Beerus, then the second he came face to face with Buu, he would have realistically known who he was and probably destroyed him. However, he seems to be completely unaware, to the degree that in the extended version of Battle of Gods the movie, Beerus actually challenged Oolong to a rock-paper-scissors contest, thinking that Oolong and Buu were the same species because they were both pink, which is kind of ridiculous even for Dragon Ball standards. So I think this probably comes down to Beerus being asleep at the time that MAJIN BUU was going throughout the universe, destroying worlds, civilizations, and the Supreme Kais. I mean, after all, this probably didn't happen over the course of hundreds or thousands of years. It was probably a really quick process, especially considering that for the majority of it, it was actually Kid Buu with Bibbidi. However, considering that Whis doesn't sleep and typically has a much better idea of what was going on, I'm assuming he was watching the whole time. And I guess didn't even bother to wake Beerus up. Maybe he thought it was more fun that way. And the next question also relates to Buu, which is, why didn't Goku get Gohan or Gotenks to defeat Kid Buu during his fight against him at the end of the Buu saga? And now I know a lot of people will say, well, that's because Goku was stronger than both of them, which you can see in videos that I and other YouTubers have done explaining just how much stronger they were than Goku, such as How Strong is Gotenks in Dragon Ball Z, which you can find on my channel. However, really the reason for this comes down to a combination of plot convenience, which many of these questions do, as well as the general idea that Toriyama, and I guess Vegeta through him, were trying to achieve. And that was having the people of Earth fight for themselves for once and actually help to defeat a villain. You know, that's the whole reason why they went with the Spirit Bomb at the end, not just because the Spirit Bomb is a super powerful ability that can directly target Kid Buu's energy, but because of what it represented in that the people of the Earth were actually helping to defeat their threat for once. Although unfortunately Toriyama also had the characters wipe all of their memories with the Dragon Balls, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of that. But Goku didn't need to use the Spirit Bomb to defeat Kid Buu. He could have done it if he was fused with Vegeta, or Gohan or Gotenks, who were much stronger than both of those characters combined, could have easily destroyed him too. You didn't need the Spirit Bomb, which I explained in my other video, is the Spirit Bomb the only way to kill Buu. And of course, Toriyama decided to write Goku back in there and let him steal the spotlight away from his sons. So you weren't going to let his sons actually beat the villain like they realistically should have, especially at the end of his manga. And the next one comes down to when exactly Toriyama was planning to end it, with the question of, wasn't Dragon Ball supposed to end with Frieza or with Cell? And the answer to that is no. There's a lot of points during the Dragon Ball manga where it seems like things would have ended, but Toriyama nonetheless continued his story, such as at the end of the 23rd tournament, and then of course during the end of the Frieza saga, where a lot of people assume that because Goku was off in space and he was doing his secret training, and that Frieza was built up as the ultimate villain, that this must have been the ending, but it was clear that Toriyama was still writing even more and planned even more in the future, which is even more obvious when you read the manga version as opposed to the anime version, and you see that immediately after the end of that arc, we see that Mecha Frieza and King Cold are on their way to Earth. So there's no real break like we saw in the anime. And when it came to the Cell Saga, there might be a little more evidence in some ways for Toriyama considering ending the story there, specifically because the fact that he does switch over to Gohan as his main character, and Goku and Vegeta are finished with their fighting at the end of that arc, with Goku being dead and going to heaven instead of coming back, and Vegeta saying he'll never fight again. So again, that does seem like a really great place to end the story, but nonetheless, Toriyama was still writing even more after that with the Buu saga, and clearly wanted to do more with Gohan as the main character before he eventually changed his mind on the whole idea. So for the most part, when there's the idea of was Dragon Ball supposed to end here, the only place that we could say it was really supposed to end was at the end of the Buu saga. And that came down to a combination of Toriyama's health and the fact that, you know, all stories really should end, although Dragon Ball Super kinda changed that. And the next question would be, what if Goku had his potential unlocked? Now, of course, this is another really interesting question that dates back to the Buu saga, when of course the Elder Supreme Kai was unleashed from the Z-Sword and used his special ability to unlock Gohan's hidden potential, giving him his ultimate Gohan state, and letting him access all of his power without even needing to transform. So when we take that and we apply it to Goku, who we've seen continually get stronger and stronger, especially in Dragon Ball Super, there's the question of, what if Goku had his potential unlocked, and how much more powerful would he have been than he was in the Buu saga? And I think one of the big factors that goes into this would have to be how Toriyama perceived potential in the first place. Because when we think of potential, we typically think of a character or something reaching its maximum or zenith. It can't go any higher than that. But of course, as we've seen in Dragon Ball Super, Gohan has become way more powerful than he was during the Buu saga, and so has Goku, to the point where base Goku is stronger than anyone from Dragon Ball Z. And unlike Gohan, who was around 18 at the time of the Buu saga, if you use correct math and not Toriyama math, Goku's body had already fully developed by this point in the story. However, I doubt that Goku would be as strong in his base form or his ultimate state as like Ultra Instinct, for example, if the old Supreme Kai were to bring everything out of him. I think what Toriyama intends with the whole potential concept is more of what the character would be at if they were to have trained constantly up until that point in the story. So with Gohan, the reason why he was so much more powerful in his ultimate is because that's how strong he would have been if he had trained his entire life up until that that point, or at the very least had trained that much since the Cell Saga. And with Goku, he pretty much did train his entire life up until that point, with him achieving his Super Saiyan 3 power. So it's possible that if Goku had his potential unlocked by the Elder Supreme Kai, that he would have been as strong as his Super Saiyan 3 in his ultimate, except without wasting any stamina transforming and maintaining the form. So this would realistically still place him below Gohan. However, if he had his potential unlocked like right now, then maybe he'd be as strong as he is as Ultra Instinct in his ultimate, except he may just not have the mastery of self-movement. And then there's God Ki, which is something else entirely that I'll save for another video. And next would be, are Dragon Ball characters faster than the speed of light? And of course, there's a big subset of fans and non-fans who seem to believe that characters in Dragon Ball aren't anywhere near as fast as power scalers and debaters like to say that they are. They like to say that because certain characters can follow the movements of Dragon Ball fighters, or because we the audience can see them more often than not, then that means that they're not faster than light. But that's not true at all, and it's pretty obvious that characters in Dragon Ball have been faster than light since early Dragon Ball Z. I mean, all we have to do is look at how Raditz dodged Piccolo's Makanko Sapo, which is an even faster move than the Kamehameha, or we just have to look at the fact that King Kai was able to follow Goku's ship on its journey to Namek, despite the fact that it was moving many times faster than light, and then when he's trying to follow the fight between Goku and Frieza on Namek, he can't even do so because of how fast they're moving. So I think that there's enough circumstantial evidence to say yes, they do in fact move significantly faster than light, and at this point they probably move thousands or millions of times more. And the next question is in the same vein, which is, can Dragon Ball characters really destroy what they claim? So one of the big things that we see a lot of non-Dragon Ball fans, especially on forums like Comic Book Resources and other websites saying, is that Dragon Ball characters can't really destroy many of the things that they claim. These are people who constantly downplay Dragon Ball not only in terms of their speed, but destructive capabilities, mostly because of the fact that they're biased towards a character like Superman or Thor or Silver Surfer, and they don't want to admit that Dragon Ball characters can defeat many versions of those characters. And so they'll say things like, oh, Frieza clearly couldn't have destroyed Planet Vegeta in his first form, because as we see during the Namek Saga, Frieza in his final form struggled to destroy Planet Namek, despite the fact that they're two completely different planets, and because Frieza and Goku specifically say that Frieza was holding back a ton of his power because he didn't want to get caught in the explosion. But considering the fact that characters who are literally thousands to millions of times weaker, such as Master Roshi in the 21st tournament, were capable of destroying the moon, I think it's safe to say Frieza could have easily done this feat. And typically when Toriyama has a character say that they can do something, such as Cell saying that he could destroy the solar system with one attack, it's safe to say that these characters could probably do that because of authorial intent. And I don't see why it's so hard for certain people to believe this, considering the fact that we see characters like Superman shattering reality with his punches when he tries, and vibrating himself to a frequency that can literally save the entire universe. But again, most of this just comes down to bias against Dragon Ball characters. And coming up at number 8 is CHICHI a bad mother? And of course, we've heard this question for a very long time, dating back to really the Saiyan arc of Dragon Ball Z. And mostly because of what we saw happen with Gohan in Dragon Ball Z, and then with Goten in Dragon Ball Super. And that's because the fact that Chi-Chi is such an overbearing and strict parent, that sometimes it would appear to have a kind of adverse effect on characters such as Gohan, who are kind of needed when it comes to these ultimate battles that will settle the fate of the entire universe. But I don't think that Chi-Chi trying to do the best for her children and trying to ensure that they don't go out to fight is necessarily the trait of a bad mother. I think a lot of it comes down to the fact of how Toriyama wrote her, to where she was kind of antagonistic when it came to Goku and Gohan. Because Goku, and to a degree Gohan, wanted to help out and become stronger, and when it came time to fight, they always wanted to fight. But Chi-Chi was always trying to step in the way and make it where they didn't, make it where Goku got a job, make it where Gohan studied instead of training. So from the perspective of a show that is based around characters fighting for the sake of the universe, obviously that isn't really the most helpful. But I don't think that necessarily makes her a bad mother, rather she's just way too overprotective and overbearing. overbearing. However, there's certainly a strong argument for her being a bad wife, which we've seen many times throughout the Dragon Ball story. And her character has never really been the best written either. And next up also deals with Gohan, and that is, what is Gohan a scholar of? And the answer to this is something I honestly don't know. Ever since Gohan was introduced, we were told that he wanted to be a scholar. That's why he was always studying, that's why he kept going to school, and that's why at the very end of Z, we see that he is now officially a scholar. And we see a little of that in Dragon Ball Super as well. But the question is, what is he even studying? What is he even a scholar of? And how does he apply this to his life? And so far, Dragon Ball Super, Toriyama, Toei, and everyone else involved in the Dragon Ball franchise doesn't really seem to either care or have a good answer for us at this time. And for a character that has been so important over the course of the franchise, such as Gohan, you'd think that they would at least explain to us what the guy is a scholar of that is constantly always taking him out of the fights. And if it's nothing, then why can't he just be a scholar of martial arts so that we don't have this stupid contrived reason for why he doesn't fight anymore? And finally, the last question is, can Saiyans breathe in space? And the answer to that is only non-canon Saiyans, or when Toei is writing it. And the reason I say that is because Toriyama himself has always said that Saiyans cannot breathe or at least survive in space, since no one should be able to realistically breathe in space since there's no oxygen. And during his materials, when we see characters seemingly in space, such as Bardock, or when Goku is fighting Beerus, he says that they're in the quote upper atmosphere and can breathe a little bit, which is still pretty dubious, since if you were to climb up Mount Everest, for example, which is far below that, you would need oxygen. However, when it comes to Toei's writing, it's a lot more difficult to write that off because we see Vegeta specifically flying around in space on multiple examples during the fillers, such as in the Garlic Jr. saga, and then during his training when he becomes a Super Saiyan. And we also see Broly and Paragus flying around in space and blowing up asteroids and planets, which means that somehow Toei thinks that these characters can survive in space while Toriyama does not. And all we have to do is look at Dragon Ball GT and Dragon Ball Super to see that Toei doesn't always have the best idea of how these characters' powers work, which is why they change so often. So these have been 10 frequently asked questions about Dragon Ball. Can you think of any others I haven't covered in the past? Let me know down below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and make sure to stick around because there's a lot more to come in the future.
Yeah, and you better subscribe.